on, everybody? You tuned in to the 48 Laws podcast. My name is Rudy Malumba.
And I'm John Karp.
And let's get right into this book. All right, today, this episode, we're going to do law number 9 and law number 10. Law number 9 is win through your actions, never through argument. The judgment is any momentary triumph you think you have gained through argument is really a Pyrrhic victory. The resentment and ill will you stir up is stronger and lasts longer than any momentary change of opinion. It is much more powerful to get others to agree with you through your actions without saying a word. Demonstrate, do not explicate.
All right. And the example that Green gives in the book is a guy called Publius Crassus Dives Musinius. And I'm just going to call him Musinius from here on out because that's a tongue twister if ever I saw one. Anyway, so Musinius was a Roman consul, who was in the process of laying siege to a town called Pergamus in Greece, which is near modern-day Athens. And he needed a battering ram to get into the city. So he had noticed that in the harbor of Athens, there were several ships that he could use the mast to use as a battering ram to get into the city. Mm. So he sent some guys to go speak with the military engineer that was over there to, hook him up with a battering ram. So the guys, find this engineer and tell him what their consul needs. And the engineer goes, okay, well, the size of mast he's asking for is way too big. It's not going to be effective in bringing down the gates to the city. You really want to use a smaller battering ram because it's going to be way more feasible to actually, push the battering ram instead of this big, massive thing. And these guys basically told the engineer, like, you really want to do what he says, man. This is not a guy you want to screw with. Yeah. The engineer goes, don't worry about it, guys. It's like once he sees the logic of what I'm saying, he's going to be like, oh, this engineer guy's a genius, right? And these guys go, no, dude, you really should do what he says.
You don't know him like we do.
You do not know this guy like we do. And he's like, all right, fine. So he says, all right, well, I'll send the size of battering ram that he wants. So those two guys leave and go over to where the consul is, right? And when they leave, the engineer goes, the heck with these guys. I know what's right. So he sends the smaller mast to where the siege is happening. So Musinius got this battering ram that was too small for what he specified. And so he turns to the two gentlemen that he sent over to go speak with the engineer, and he goes, why did you tell him to send me the smaller mast for a battering ram? And his two aides go, we didn't. We told him to, send a larger size. And so at this point, Musinius is just furious. And he's like, that freaking engineer. So he's like, all right, get an engineer over here now. So the engineer shows up, and Musinius is like, all right, explain yourself, right? Yeah. And the engineer, gives him the same spiel that he gave the other two gentlemen. And he's like, so you see, in order for us to successfully breach the walls of the city, I chose to send you the smaller masthead instead. Yeah. And Musinius is like, all right, I'm still going to beat the ever-living crap out of you. And so sure enough, like these guys, he ordered him to be whipped and prodded with like hot iron rods or something until he died. Yeah. So, and by the way, they put off the siege just to punish this guy.
Just to punish him.
Yeah.
Well, here's my question with that is, didn't the engineer explain why? In a way, didn't he kind of demonstrate why it's better to use a smaller battering ram?
He didn't really demonstrate it, though. He never got a chance to demonstrate it.
But he was, because he constantly explained to the two guys, I know they're nothing, I guess they're just sent to do a job. Yeah. But he did, like you're saying, when Musinius was like, explain yourself and kind of explain why you did it. I think Green mentioned that he tried to explain why it would work to use a smaller battering ram and all the kind of engineering mumbo jumbo.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I guess Musonius just wasn't feeling it. He was like, no, I'm too married to my opinion on this that I'm not even going to listen to an expert on how to do this.
But that's exactly the thing, though. Like, when people are convinced that they're right about something,
yeah,
that's exactly the thing. You can give them expert opinion or expert analysis and opinions at the wazoo, and they're not going to listen to it. And someone who's like Musonius, he wasn't just born into the consulship. He worked his way up there, and or maybe he was an aristocrat, possibly.
Yeah,
and it just kind of probably always thought, well, I'm right, and anybody who disobeys me is a fool.
Is wrong. Yeah,
yeah,
it's my way or the highway.
Exactly. And there are people like that, and I think we talked about this in Law 1. Don't outshine the master.
Yep.
If you're in a situation where you're working under somebody, it's kind of wise of you not to come off as being
kind of like a know-it-all,
or superior in their abilities.
Yeah.
Not to saying that you should dumb down your abilities, but at the same time you have to be, strategic as to when you reveal just how brilliant you might be.
Yeah.
At a particular craft or whatever.
So it's very interesting because one thing I like about these examples is you can kind of because there's a lot of nuance in life, right? So the nuances of these examples I think are kind of important too, and in a way they could actually explain even more about the law than just a description of it and stuff.
Yeah.
But I always try to think like how would, since this is a transgression, like what would we have to do if this was happening to one of us to make it an observance?
An observance?
Because he was in a position where, as an engineer, he knew that if we use the wrong one, it's going to make our whatever we're trying to do not as effective. So he was actually thinking long term, and he was thinking about what the best course of action will be and what the best way to achieve that.
Right.
So now if he goes, okay, I know that what they want to do is wrong. So like if he had that line of thinking, he said, okay, you guys go ahead and do what you want to do. He gave him the bigger battering ram, whatever, and then they did it and failed. Wouldn't he kind of get the same punishment?
Probably. I mean, I think he was probably in a lose-lose situation.
Yeah.
I think, that's the thing about that particular example is, I don't think the engineer was going to come out on top either way. I think, maybe what he could have done possibly is send both rams.
Yeah.
And be like, hey, if the big one doesn't work, try the small one.
Okay. Yeah.
That would probably be his best option.
Yeah, because I think you're right about that. Yeah, because I was thinking about the other one. If he had just sent the big one, chances, because he would be technically demonstrating why the big one doesn't work.
Exactly.
But he would technically get I believe he would get the same punishment. But yeah, sending both of them, I think would be a little bit more effective.
Yeah.
One thing I liked about this law is that it relates to other kind of principles that Robert Greene has talked about kind of in some of his other books. And he talks a lot about, I read this book called Mastery that he wrote. He talks a lot about social intelligence. And the book Mastery is really all about getting better at your craft and the process it takes to get better at it and stuff. And you just see a lot of those kind of principles in like this book, the 48 Laws of Power. But social intelligence is all about, being able to, whenever you're learning a craft and you're getting good at that, being able to socialize with other people is a very important part of it. Being able to kind of have empathy with people and to think inside someone else, you know what I mean? To be empathetic in that way where you can kind of, converse with someone and kind of see things from their point of view and et cetera, et cetera. I feel like a little bit of that is applied in this law where if you have something that you want to communicate to someone else, but let's say they have another point of view about it, the best thing to do is to kind of get in their head and to show them why what I'm thinking is correct versus yours. So like the best way to do that is really to be kind of above language, right? I kind of feel like the way, when you argue and when you're just kind of using your words to convince someone else, it turns into and he talks about this in the book, but it really turns into a thing where it's easy for someone to get insecure. It's easy for someone to become kind of like defensive, like, oh, this person thinks they're smarter than me, and they lose sight of what it is that they're arguing for, even if it's something for the common good. So the best way to do it, to not intimidate other people, to not make other people think you're more intelligent, is to kind of show them the correct way through symbols and through action. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Which can be difficult to do given the situation.
Yeah.
But definitely getting on the news and trying to argue your point of view never works.
Yeah. We see it all the time.
Yeah, we see it all the time.
You turn on MSNBC, CNN, and people, they go in there and they give their points. I mean, sometimes there's just a bunch of yelling over each other. They do all of that. At the end of like that 10, 15 minutes, nothing's resolved. People are more angry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like you always feel like, I try to think of any argument I've ever had. I never really think I won. And for most cases, whenever I do think I won, I feel like bad for the other person, or I feel like I severed a relationship.
Oh, I mean, yeah, that could happen. I suppose that may have happened to me before, but I don't know. Sometimes I think that if you and whoever it might be that you had a argument with, that like if they severed their relationship with you because they disagree with you on something, then it's like
it's probably not a great friend.
It's probably not a great friend to have anyway.
Yeah.
So, and also too, I think it's not like, I think people don't understand what arguing really actually entails.
Mm-hmm.
I think people think arguing is just a passion explanation of your beliefs, but that's not really what an argument is. An argument, at least in the strictest philosophical sense, is really just laying out your case with points, and that's it. That's all it is.
Kind of divorced from emotion.
From emotion, exactly. Yeah, it's all logic based. It's not emotion based.
Yeah.
But people have, I think, in the last probably 50 or so years, we've turned it into an emotion based thing in our political discussions and everything else, which is a real shame because I believe that it's really kind of degraded the political discussion.
Yeah.
And people are just arguing out of what they feel about something and not what they know about something.
What they know about it, exactly.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like if, really, at the risk of sounding cheesy, really, like, if that's how people argue nowadays, things would kind of run a lot smoother, I think, because it would be something where people would be more receptive and open to what other people are saying based on logic and not on emotion. And I kind of feel like that's what this law kind of combats against, which is it takes into account people's kind of fragile ego, people's fragile kind of emotions, and the way the way it's so normal nowadays, or it's so normal in general for people to sway based on their emotions. So the best way to do that and not affect other people's emotions or make them more insecure or whatever is just to accept that those things might happen to them, and then just show them in a more indirect way. And think kind of long term about it. Another thing that he talked about in this law specifically was about how again, if you're if power is your game, you're and that's what you're planning for, it's always good to think long term. So if you do get into some sort of argument with someone, you have a point you want to tell them, but it doesn't seem like it's worth it long term to just walk away from it and not even waste your time trying to convince them in whatever indirect or direct way you're going to do it.
Definitely. I think everyone across the world can relate to spending time with your family for the holidays. Yeah. And how sometimes that can lead to situations.
There's been a great number of debates at our Thanksgiving table over the years.
Yeah.
I have a very strictly conservative older brother, and a very liberal older sister.
Mm-hmm.
And over the years, it's like they love each other and all that stuff, but like they fundamentally disagree on a lot of things.
Yeah.
So, you get into that thing where you do sit back and you listen to what they're saying, and it's like you on some level you can kind of agree with both of them, And I feel
Sure.
like if they really put some effort into it, they could actually reach some common ground. But again, such is the nature of just human nature. I feel like sometimes when you're arguing with someone emotionally, you feel attacked, you become defensive, and boom, you separate. You're more separated, even more. You're separated even more than you would have been.
And it also pays to remember, does it really matter if this person carries on believing how they believe?
Yeah.
Will it really affect anything?
Yeah.
I mean, for some people, in some situations, it might, where, I'm sure a lot of people can relate with me on this one, where you have like a racist relative, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure, you could argue with them till night and day that, the color of one's skin, it means nothing really in terms of how that person actually is.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, why bother if they're just going to, after the holidays, just be back in the factory?
Exactly.
Or whatever it is they do.
Yeah.
So what? It's not like they're running for dictator for life or anything.
Yeah.
So,
well, you know what it is, man? I think ultimately it turns into something that serves your ego, where you go like, oh, I was able to convince this person to do this. Because really, when you think about things long term, a lot of the little things we argue about really doesn't mean anything in the long term. You know what I mean? It's really all about, I'm so good at, like my reasoning for what I believe is so strong that I was able to convince someone who thought otherwise, or
right.
blah blah blah. So I think I think this law is important too, because it kind of keeps that. It's helpful in thinking about what's really important long term, and then seeing like if that is the case, and it's really important to you to be a little bit more indirect with how you convince people.
Yeah.
And go from there.
What he touched on, which I thought was really great, was using symbols.
Yeah.
Anything from like mythology to folklore, whatever, to use something that everyone, the mass culture understands. The example that pops into my head is during the lead up to the American Revolutionary War, Benjamin Franklin published basically what we would call a political cartoon nowadays, of a snake that was cut up into several pieces, and underneath each snake were the initials of the colonies, and then it says "join or die."
Join or die,
and that was in reference to a well-known, folk belief and tale that if you found a cut-up snake and you put it back together before sunset, it would rejoin itself and come back to life.
Wow!
And so it was basically saying, so people knew when they saw that what Benjamin Franklin was saying, we need to come together as these separate colonies to fight off the British, right? And he didn't really have to argue his point. All he had to do was just show that image, and it affected people so much.
Yeah, on a visceral level.
Exactly. That because people knew that folk tale, and they were like, all right, let's do it, man.
Yeah, and you know what? Oh,
well, I was going to say, that particular image has survived into the present day. Like most people in the United States know of that image.
Absolutely.
Obviously, most people in the U.S. don't believe that if you put a snake back together, it's gonna. Very few people, I'm sure, believe that, but it doesn't matter because, well, sure. I'm not saying that. I didn't say that nobody did. I just said that very few people. But people see that image and they know what it means.
It's interesting because I think that's a very powerful image and a powerful symbol, because even now, because when you just said that, I thought of another meaning of that, even, which is that really the colonies were bigger than the sum of its parts. So like individually, a cut up snake is useless. You can't do anything. But if you put them together, you can actually do a lot than it could do individually. A snake head by itself can't. I mean, how's it going to secure food? How's it going to move?
Right.
You know what I mean? But if you put it all together, then it's actually a very very powerful animal. Right.
Yeah. And
so I kind of feel like that. That way of, and it actually ties back to what Stephen Covey says in the 7 Habits, where he talks about how it talks about what's it called, when things that alter your point of view and just change how you think fundamentally. I think those are the most powerful ways to make change, or to convince someone, when you're able to tap into something that just alters their point of view.
Yeah,
And I feel like symbols, I think, are the most powerful way to do that. Something as simple as just a drawing of a cut-up snake is something that reverberates to this day still.
yeah. I mean, and I think that's why probably art and music and the arts in general are probably the most powerful vehicle for social awareness and social change as well. I mean, when AIDS hit the block in the 80s, it was very misunderstood. And I think, one of many things that helped people to better understand what AIDS was and how it spread was the movie Philadelphia. I think that really it changed the conversation of what AIDS was. It wasn't just a disease among dirty gay people, so to speak, as a lot of people believed. But as a matter of fact, that's not what I believe. That's what people thought at the time. I'm just saying. But anyway, pretty soon the conversation turned into, this is a disease that's affecting not just gays, but people outside the gay community as well, and
people you might know.
Yeah, and it's not just sleazy individuals in the gay community. It's gays who also share an actual love connection who are now being inflicted with this disease.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely, man. Well, I think all aboard, it seems as if we're kind of on a consensus with this law, where
definitely
it's I think the usual kind of line of thinking would be, you want to convince someone about something, or you want someone to understand things the way you understand things, is to argue with them and to prove your point through words and through talking and through kind of just being persuasive. But it seems like what Robert Greene's talking about in this law is really about how it's the more indirect way that's useful, the more indirect way of changing people's point of views through symbols or through actions. Demonstrating how something works versus just telling them, "Oh, trust me, it works this way."
Right.
Because I think you kind of have to work in a way that's kind of devoid of the ego, because I feel like it's the ego that kind of keeps us tied down to what our thought patterns are.
Yeah, exactly. Actions speak louder than words.
100%. The reversal for this law was there are some cases when arguing actually works to your favor, and that's in the case of deception. So what Robert Greene was talking about in the reversal was about how a lot of times when you're trying to deceive someone and you feel like they kind of have a leg up on you, the best way to kind of shake that off would be to double down with your words and just kind of be more over the top and explain things away. Like, the example he used was Victor Lustig, he was a con artist who sold faulty, he claimed there were machines that will create money,
right.
But obviously it didn't work. He didn't have that technology. And so one guy tracked him down. He had lost $10,000, tracked him down. I think he was a detective or something, but he worked with...
He was a sheriff.
He was a sheriff.
Yeah.
Tracked him down to a hotel room, knocked on the door, and as soon as Victor opened the door up, he put a gun in his face, and he said, "You sold me this faulty thing. It doesn't work, blah, 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 whatever." And, Victor Lustig, the con artist, knew it didn't work, but he was like, "There's no way, it's got to work." And so he was like, "Let me see it." And he pretended like he was looking through like the manual, the fake manual he created, and he was trying to do all these things. And he was actually able to convince the other person that he actually didn't do anything deceptive. Like, he was actually being for real by arguing with him about how the thing works. And he was able to get the guy off his feet. So in cases of being deceptive, I think that's when your arguments can actually work for you. It's not something I would recommend to anyone, though.
Yeah, you definitely got to feel that out. Although it does remind me, our listeners will probably remember Bismarck pulled the same stunt in Law 3 If you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and listen to that, and
Yeah.
you might see the same reversal being used there. But
Absolutely.
yeah, by and large, it does no good to, for the most part, it's better to show your point rather than speak it.
Let's speak it. Absolutely. Bam. So we're definitely in agreement. The law holds.
Yeah.
And it's very good. Let's switch gears to law number 10, infection. Avoid the unhappy and unlucky. The judgment on that is you can die from someone else's misery. Emotional states are as infectious as diseases. You may feel you are helping the drowning man, but you are only precipitating your own disaster. The unfortunate sometimes draw misfortune on themselves. They will also draw it out of you. Associate with the happy and the fortunate instead.
All right. Well, and this is when Green mentions the lovely Lola Montez, whose name really was not Lola. Her real name was Marie Gilbert, and she was Irish.
There you go.
But apparently her mother had some distant Spanish ancestry or what have you, so she decided to tap into that and, kind of advertise herself as being this exotic flamenco dancer.
She pulled a Mata Hari, is what she did.
Yeah, her and Mata, yes, they're both very similar.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Anyway, so she comes down to France, Paris. This always happens in France. You never notice?
Yeah.
She's always. Anyway, and she starts, she's having a hard time making it as a dancer, so she decides, I'm gonna link up with one of these up and coming folks. I'm gonna be a courtesan, so to speak, right? And so she links up with this one guy, and he decides, all right, we're gonna get married, and she's like, all right, and that doesn't tell him that she's actually already married to some guy back in England, and they never divorced. Yeah. They're still technically married. So, and eventually, their relationship just falls apart, and they have some argument, and he goes off to a party without her, and he gets drunk, and I guess someone offended her, and he, just started railing on this guy. And eventually this guy just got irritated with him and said, all right, I'm going to challenge you to a duel. And, they dueled it out, and he didn't win. So Lolo was like, oh, well.
He died in the process. Huh?
He's like, you know what? I think it was the next day. I don't think he was inebriated when he died, but be that as it may, Lolo was like, well, I got to find the next guy. So she goes to Bavaria, which is, for those of you who don't know, that's a region in Germany. This is before German unification happened. And she links up with, I think it was almost like their prime minister, kind of. I think they had some kind of, a parliament type system in Bavaria. Anyway, so she links up with him, and same thing, he gets her into all these plays, and she's terrible at what she does, but he insists that she's brilliant. Eventually he marries her, and then she starts getting involved politically. Yeah. And this starts pissing off the people of Bavaria, because not only is she a bad actress, but she's also a horrible political advisor.
Yeah. And just a bad person.
She's just this Lola chick, I tell you what. Anyway, so eventually it just gets to the point where, and she was nasty too. Like, there was one time where she was walking her dog off a leash, and the dog just saw somebody and just went after this person and just started attacking this person. And instead of helping the person, trying to get the dog away from them, she just takes her cane and starts hitting the person that's been attacked by the dog, as if
it's his fault.
It's his fault that it happened. Exactly. So it was very strange. So needless to say, Lola is not very popular amongst the people of Bavaria, and eventually they chase her out, and that prime minister loses his gig. I'm sorry, he wasn't a prime minister. He was the king. Yes, he was the king. I apologize. He was the king, and he had to abdicate. So anyway, so that didn't work out for him.
Yeah.
So, and then she decided, then she went back to England and finally ended her marriage there.
Okay.
And she did something else in England, but this is already going on long enough.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm just going to skip ahead already to the
She
end
just
of her.
left a bunch of men.
There was another man, but
a trail of men.
oh, there's a trail of men. But I'm going to go ahead and skip to the end when she gets to America, because we could spend the entire podcast talking about her. She gets to America and links up with another guy. Sure enough, same thing happens, and pretty soon after that, she finds Jesus, I guess.
Yeah.
And then, just travels the
She's
country.
always a friend in Jesus.
Well, she traveled the country preaching the good word, I guess, and then died 2 years later.
Yeah.
But all this is to say that Lola was definitely the type of person you would want to avoid.
Yeah.
She just had a toxic personality.
Yeah.
She just everywhere she went, there just seemed to be more chaos. And when there's somebody like that, that you find in life, you gotta run from them.
Yeah. I feel like her life was the ultimate lesson in maybe it's me. You know what I mean? Like when you look around and there's a like I think that's actually what Robert Greene talked about a little bit in this law. What he said that try to take a look at people's actions, the actions that they have on the world, and not what they say about them. Because someone can always kind of have like someone could mess up in a bunch of different ways, but then just say, oh, this person didn't like me, or the people of Bavaria were rude and they didn't appreciate me for who I was. You could actually come up with a bunch of different reasons for your failures and things like that. But if you kind of take a step back and analyze them, kind of away from everything else, and you kind of see that this person is causing all these things onto themselves, that's kind of when you notice like this person's not necessarily not worth saving, but there's nothing I can do to save this person. There's nothing I can do to save this person from themselves. They're in a pattern where they're affecting the world in a negative way, and the more I'm in contact with this person, the more that infection is going to get into me. I think one of the things Robert Greene was saying in the book was that as humans, we're very susceptible to that. You can't really help that. I think that's just a trait that we humans have, where you tend to be like the people you hang out with the most. So if you're trying to gain power, or you're just trying to be more effective at life, period, and you're around someone that kind of tends to suck your energy, it's not going to work out well for you, as it did for some of the men that Lola kind of associated with.
Yes, that's absolutely true, and I think this is particularly true in relationships with your significant other.
Yeah.
There's so many cases where someone will be in a relationship with someone, and there will be clear acts of domestic violence against this person.
Yeah.
But they stay in the relationship, and you're thinking from the outsider, you're thinking, why is this person doing this?
Yeah.
But as it turns out, generally, the reason why these things occur is because that the person who's being abused already went into that relationship with such a low self-esteem anyway, that in some ways you could say that they believe that they kind of deserve to be beaten, what have you. But I think what it really points to is because this person already has such a low self-esteem, they have found somebody who reinforces that belief in them, and they're like, well, this person's right. This is exactly who I am, right?
Yeah.
And so they end up linking up with just terrible people, you know? And so the trick really is to, number one, fix yourself, right? Build up your own self-esteem and find people who are generous and can influence you to have better habits. Yeah. Stay away from people who influence you in a bad way.
Who tend to disempower you.
Exactly.
People who empower you.
Which can be tricky, though. It can be tricky because if you're kind of a Debbie Downer, and you're trying to find people to kind of pep you up a bit, they may not want to be around you for the same reason that they don't want to be brought down. So
the reason you want to be around them is the same reason they don't want to be around you.
Exactly. So that's why I would say I would add the caveat of, you really have to work on yourself first,
Absolutely.
and be at least comfortable with yourself enough, and then look for people to kind of to build up that
I see
self-esteem.
what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's more than just associate. Like for someone like a Lola Montez, who really, I mean, she probably wasn't even aware of all the things that. I mean, she probably wasn't aware of what her part in all her mistakes and all the things that she screwed up. She probably wasn't even aware of that. But like for someone like her, someone who's kind of someone who screws up a lot, the number one thing wouldn't just be, okay, let me just cut off all the people I know who disempower me. Let me hang out with people who are, more generous, more happy, more whatever. You're saying it's more about first taking that time to yourself and fixing yourself, and then associating with the kind of people that empower you, as opposed to just
right. Yeah. And and here's a good point too. We live in an age where we have access to a lot of information.
Yeah.
You can go on to YouTube and listen to inspirational talks.
Absolutely.
Or just interviews to interesting people who have been through some stuff,
Who got out of their own way.
And learn from them.
Absolutely.
Not just that, but there's books and all kinds of stuff that you can dive into if you're really serious about, improving your life and your self-worth. There's a whole industry on just
$1 billion
self-improvement. Yeah, it's $1 billion industry, and there's a reason why it's $1 billion industry. Is because it works most of the time.
I feel like sometimes that it gets a bad rap because people go, "Oh, they're making money off you," but the reality is, a lot of these things that, like, even a lot of the self-help people talk about comes from ancient principles that have been around for years, where it's like a simple thing that you have to implement every day. Maybe they say it in a flashier way,
right?
But those things are very important. I mean, being able to like fixing yourself, quote unquote, or just getting yourself to kind of have, just to have better habits and just to kind of learn things like that is something that's, if we're talking 48 Laws of Power, we're talking about the power game and all that stuff. I think that's the number one thing to do first. You kind of have to have mastery over yourself first before you can, learn some of the techniques on how to kind of gain power and or even to combat against it, because that's kind of the number one thing that people tend to use in order to, take advantage of you or whatever it is.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And as far as like people making money off of that, is that really such a bad thing?
Yeah, right.
they're giving you, knowledge.
Chipotle makes millions of dollars, and people are. Tastes great.
People spend money on cigarettes, and it's been known to give you lung cancer and all kinds of other health problems. And yeah, really, reading a book that's gonna better yourself.
Yeah,
I have to pay for that. So what?
Yeah,
the author's got to eat too.
Absolutely.
Come on.
Absolutely. The effect that's gonna have on you is especially if you apply it, is unbelievable.
Oh yeah.
There was a portion in this law where Robert Greene was talking about how there's kind of a difference between the kind of people who you can help and the kind of people who it's kind of outside of your power to help. There's definitely people out there who've been who are really in situations where circumstances were just outside of what they could do, and they need your help. But I think that's why he also said that you should kind of look at the effect that they have out on the world. Like someone who constantly, puts out kind of positive energy, or someone who does positive things but tend to kind of have kind of bad stuff happen to them or whatever, or the kind of people who they already have that kind of inward thing kind of figured out and you can help them, versus people who just consistently, affect the world in a negative way.
Yeah, I you can tell a difference because people who are seriously in trouble will take the help that they're given and they'll grow from that.
Absolutely.
And probably they'll end up giving people in return because they know how much it meant when somebody helped them.
Definitely.
Whereas somebody who just jumped on the victim train, they're going to take that help and it's going to feed into their victim psychology.
Absolutely.
Even more.
Yeah, because they could go like, oh, last time when I whined and whined and whined, I got this positive reinforcement.
Exactly.
So I'm just going to repeat that because that's the only way I can get this attention that I'm really seeking.
Yeah.
One thing I thought about when I was reading this was, I think it's easy, or it can be easy if you're in a situation where you kind of want to cut. Let's say you have kind of done that where you're in the process of fixing yourself, and you kind of wanted to kind of just get better at dealing with little things in your life, but you also realize that the company you keep is kind of shoddy. I feel like when it's your friends or people you might not have really known that long, it can be easy to just go, I'm just going to cut this person off and not communicate with them. When it's with someone that's closer to you, like to your family, or someone you've kind of grown up with or whatever, and let's say it's not really a situation where maybe this person's abusive or something, but it's more like the person's just a Debbie Downer and the person's just not really fun to be around. The person really isn't helping you grow. You know what I mean? I was kind of thinking about what the best thing, if you're in a situation like that, what the best thing to do would be to eliminate yourself from that.
It just depends. I mean, I would say if they're just a Debbie Downer and that's it, just have limited contact with them. I mean, if it's somebody that you live with, all you can do is just kind of rise above it.
Yeah.
But if it's like a distant a relative who lives in a different town or state or what have you, I mean, you talk on the phone every once in a while.
Yeah.
Just have your conversation.
Just kind of catch up with them. And
keep it short because, you don't want to spend an hour on a phone listening to somebody talk about how crappy their life is.
Stuff, yeah.
Just keep it short. Be like, listen, I got to go and do this and whatever.
Yeah.
And, go on about your day and just kind of forget about it. I think that's
absolutely
the best advice. And, you can't really, they might be your relatives, but it doesn't mean you can help them.
Yeah.
They're just like anybody else, really. I mean, just because they share your blood doesn't really mean anything. It's just a matter of, they have to just like everybody else, they have to pull themselves out of their own crap.
Absolutely.
And I mean, if they're seeking help, do what you can to help. But
absolutely.
Sometimes too, people will say that they want help, but
they don't.
They really don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you just have to. I don't know. You have to look at each individual situation, and
definitely,
if there's nothing that can be done, then there's nothing that can be done. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. I think so. So obviously, for this law, there's no reversal. Robert Greene pretty much just said that there's, hanging out with more, like if you're, you're someone who kind of has a negative outlook on life and you hang out with more negative people, things probably aren't going to change. You know what I mean? So there's no real kind of reversal with this. And I feel like a normal, like a common theme that we've been seeing as we kind of survey the material here is that, like, even though on the surface, a book like the 48 Laws of Power seems like, and you've even, like, if you buy the book and you read some of the reviews and stuff, people will say it's amoral and it's cunning and it's this and that, it's ruthless and everything like that. But it's like when we touch on subjects like this, like the past few minutes of us just discussing this, it really seemed like just an after school special. You know what I mean? Like it's a very positive kind of thing where it's like these are important things for you to think about in your day-to-day life. The kind of people you surround yourself with and ways to kind of improve yourself. I feel like this, if the overall arc of someone who wants to achieve power, someone who wants to defend against people taking advantage of them, it really takes a lot of inner strength to do that. It takes a lot of inner strength and a lot of self-confidence, it takes a lot of work. And I feel like to be successful at life, period, it takes a lot of work and a lot of inner work also. So that's what's reflected, I think, in this book.
We've said this many times on this podcast, but these laws of power, you can either use them for good or bad.
Absolutely.
We promote the idea of using them for good.
Absolutely.
And I don't, these last two laws in particular, that these are pretty golden rules.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
very positive. So, I think there's consensus here for this law.
It's a rubber stamp of approval.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
And we're both 100% on it.
All right.
All right. Well, for the 48 Laws podcast, I've been Rudy Malumbo.
And I'm John Karp.
Signing off. That was our take. What do you think? Email us at the 48 Laws of Power podcast at gmail.com.
We're on iTunes, YouTube, and Spotify.
Make sure to tune in every Monday for a new episode.